So I get the privilege to step in for Ron this week, and we're continuing through Mark. So the next passage that came up is actually pretty interesting because it's really common. I bet everybody in here has heard this story. And so it's tricky because the temptation is to say, all right, well, I already know that one, and move on to the next one. My goal today is to be able to get us into, I want to take us back 2,000 years and try to be in the moment. So we're going to do some things today, a little odd, to try to get us into the spot where we can imagine ourselves in the space, in that time and place, experiencing these things as if it was happening to us. Just going to open with a quick word of prayer. Dear God, we invite you into this place. You are so good, and every one of the stories out of the Bible calls this out to us. And we're excited that this one does today too. I pray that you help us to be able to still ourselves, open our hearts, open our minds to receive what you have today. Pray that you be with me, put the words that you need to be spoken into my mouth. Help me to blend into the background. Pray that you would get all the glory, and that your word would pierce right into the place of our soul where it needs to be, that we'd be able to leave today, being able to experience what these people experienced back there, having a personal interaction with Jesus. All right, to recap, Jesus is just kicking off his ministry. He hasn't called all of his disciples yet. He just has a handful that he's picked out. He has picked out the fishermen, James, John, Peter, Andrew. He hasn't gotten to Matthew and some of the others. In the last chapter, he went into Capernaum, which was that seaside town, and he actually spoke in the synagogue and really made a ruckus, or stir, not a ruckus, but a stir because of the authority in which he spoke. The people were like, this guy speaks in a way like none of our religious leaders have spoken, almost as if he knows some sort of inside scoop, right? What Jesus did. Jesus was God in person, and so for him to be there, he was able to speak as if he knew God, because he did know God, and it just really captured people. He speaks with such authority. Then, soon after he healed a demon-possessed man, got a lot of kind of attention for that. And then this book of the Bible, Mark doesn't say, but the other two books say that he actually went around some more. He went to Nazareth, his hometown, where he was born, and they were happy at first to see their homegrown hero come home. But before too long, they wanted miracles of their own, and they kind of turned on him, and he escaped. They were trying to kill him, but he escaped. And so after that, Nazareth wasn't really home anymore. And so it says in Luke that he actually made Capernaum his home away from home. His friends lived there, his disciples, and that this was like Peter and James. So if you've ever had a friend whose home is as home as yours, that's kind of where Jesus was. He didn't have a house there or anything, but he was basically settled in Capernaum. It was short-lived, his being able to move around a little bit, because Peter's mother-in-law was sick. He went back to Capernaum, and Peter's mother-in-law was sick, and so when he was there, he healed her, and Pastor Ron spoke about this a couple weeks ago. He healed her, and it made a stir, and as soon as the Sabbath ended, which was the afternoon, the people were allowed to move around again, and they all came and beat up. It says the whole town came. And they brought all these people, and it says later in one of the other passages, he healed them all. And so you imagine this late-night healing session where Jesus is just, in my mind, I don't see him just kind of going down. I see him spending time with each person, hearing their story, getting into them, and it just went late into the night, it said. And so everybody from Capernaum who had an ailment wanted to meet this person. Jesus is now no longer in obscurity. And it says the next morning he got up and he left. He left early in the morning before anybody could find him. You have to imagine there was the crowd for the next day was going to be bigger than the first day. And yet he was out. The disciples came and they found him and they're like, why? We really have a chance to make a movement here, a momentum. And Jesus is like, no, this isn't why I'm here. I'm not about so much the healing, I'm about preaching my message. And I have to be able to get to other places. And so he got out quick before day 2 healing session in Capernaum. And he's moving around to other places. But then he met the leper we heard last week. He went up and touched him. And it says that after he healed him, the leper just couldn't keep his excitement to himself. Jesus couldn't go anywhere. It says that he stayed out in the wilderness in lonely places. And people still found him. And so he was just such a magnetic personality that no matter where he went, he had this call to him. And so he stayed out in the wilderness. Outside of Capernaum is where the Sermon on the Mount, there's mountains and stuff. And so he would stay out, people would find him, and he'd be able to spend time with them. The Sermon on the Mount was coming right near this. So this is right up on the hills outside of Capernaum. However, it says, so now we're going to start today in verse 2. It says, a few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come back home. So hopefully that makes more sense. Capernaum wasn't his birthplace, but it was his new home. And he had darted out so quickly before that it was like, oh, he's back. and everybody's really anxious to see what's going on. Let's give a little bit more background into Capernaum. So this little town was a fishing town primarily. It's right on the coast of the Sea of Galilee, up on the north shore. And just to give you some people have a mental, spatial map in their head. And so the way Capernaum, if you think of it, the Sea of Galilee at that point was about 5 miles wide. So if you think of from BL England to the inlet was about the size of the waterway, but it was open, there wasn't islands and stuff. And Capernaum was right in the middle, kind of where the Summers Point boat ramp is. So, you got 2 miles to go that way, 2 miles to go that way. It was a good spot for a fishing thing. They had all these little ports and docks and stuff. They've actually uncovered them. When the water level goes down in the Sea of Galilee, they were able to do some archaeological digging, and so they found all these, places where the fishermen would catch them, would spread out their boats and stuff. So you get this vibrant community in Capernaum. And it says that the next town, I looked and I found some other places where they had found other docks, and the next one was about 2 miles away, kind of to the west. And so, there's a bunch of docks here, and then there was a spread out, there was another town nearby. I mention this because it says that in verse 2 that everyone gathered together and packed the room for Jesus to speak the word to them. This wasn't primarily a healing time, like it had been the last time. In my guess, because he had healed almost everybody. He stayed till the last one got addressed last time. So now the Capernaum is not packed, and it's his first time there, it's his first moments there. And it's not so much about the healing now, so he's preaching. The house is packed to the gills. And so, now he's able to do what he wanted to do the whole time, which is preach, which is teach. Verse 2 says, they gathered in such large numbers, there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Let's talk about this room a little bit, what it was like for houses back in this time period. They would have little rooms around a courtyard. So imagine 3 or 4 rooms kind of in a square, and an open courtyard in the middle. And they didn't really spend too much time in the rooms. There wasn't a lot of windows. They just slept in there. They would do whatever they could out in the courtyard. That was the common area where they would get together with people. At nighttime, they would shut up the animals in there. So, it was, I imagine, fairly big. Big enough that a tree could fit across it, because some courtyards were open and some were closed. And this one we're going to find out was actually closed in. But it's small enough that a tree could reach from one side to the other. Right? So it's not a huge courtyard, but it's bigger than the room. So this is the space Jesus was probably in. Being able to teach the people. And so this courtyard area was packed with people that are trying to listen to Jesus. When they would close it in, a lot of times they'd put a tree across the top, beams across the top, and there's an example. And then they would be able to put sticks across the beams, and then cover it in with thatch and mud and stuff like that, so that it would be relatively weatherproof. It wasn't, it's still not huge, right? It's bigger than the bedroom, but it's not a huge space. And so you kind of have this mental picture of this open space. Now the roof they would flatten, and they would do. The Bible talks about all sorts of things that happen up on the roof. They would spread out some crops and let them dry. In Jericho, they hid some spies up there in the crops. Sometimes they would go up there in the cool of the evening because it was cooler than in the house with no air conditioner or anything. And so they would sleep up there. Sometimes there was festivals and booths where they would either, spend some time. Some people would build a booth for guests. Elisha spent some time up on the roof. And so they had a way to get up there. It usually was a ladder or a little staircase to get up there. But it wasn't like a floor. It was this, the earthen spread area. And they would have, sometimes they'd even dug up some rocks, smooth rocks that they used to spread out the mud and the clay and stuff to kind of flatten it out a little bit. You could walk on it, you had to be tender, right? You could see it's not, it's not structural, but you could kind of get around a little up there and spend some time up on the roof. Spend a lot of time talking on the roof, you'll see why in a second. Now Peter, they actually think, this is really cool, they actually think that they found Peter's house. Archaeologists have found one particular house in Capernaum once they dug it up that had a wall knocked out to make the courtyard bigger, and then they had spent a little bit extra time kind of mortaring the walls to make it look a little special. And there's a guess that this was one of the first churches that they were meeting in this space. There's some inscriptions on the wall about Peter that talk about him being in this house and stuff like that. And so it's just fun to think about that this might be the house that they were in. The house that soon became one of the first churches. The wall hadn't been, it's still a home right now. But this was Peter's home. Impromptu became a center of gathering and a center of the church. And so Jesus is teaching. So the room was packed. There was no room even at the door. Luke says that there were religious teachers from as far away as Jerusalem. Mark doesn't say this, but Luke says that these religious teachers came from far away to hear these teachings. This was creating a stir. In the previous chapter it said, this is a new teaching, and so they had sent some of the educated ones up. So you have this mix of people in there, some outsiders, some locals that are trying to hear it. You really get this electricity of the moment, right? Where like, Jesus was back, we were hoping, we didn't know where he went last time, we wanted so much more of him, he's back, and everybody just wants to hear every word that comes out of his mouth, so everybody's pressing in as tight as they can be. There's no room to wiggle in this space, there's no social distancing. We're elbow to elbow. You can't get, it says not even at the door. Like there's no room at the door for somebody to look in. This place is packed to the gills. Ever got the moment, right? Can you imagine being in this tight space, but you don't even care because you get to hear, you're one of the lucky ones who's in, and you get to hear what he's saying. You're in this room. All right. Now it says some men came bringing a paralyzed man carried by 4 of them. So I've given some background, but I think for this next step, I'm going to do something a little strange. I'm going to get some volunteers. So I'm going to have Robbie and Jim Roby and Jimmy Boyle and Dan Hartman and Mark Hopp come up. Just pick a couple.
Get out, right?
They don't really know I had it. That was my fault. So I went to the woods yesterday and cut down some trees and made this. So you guys pick who's paralyzed man. Pick up corners. And now there's a reason I'm doing this. It's not just to be silly. Well, get on, pick it up. Well, one person lies on it, the other 4 pick it up. All right, there's a reason I'm doing this. It's not just to be silly. Like you can feel the weight in your arms, right? Like there's a burden that's actually in the moment. When it says that the 4 men came carrying on a mat, you get this like real simple idea. Now I will go one step further and say that I don't think he was a local. Take a guess why I don't think he was a local. They carried him, but like why do I not think he was from Capernaum? Yell it out.
He would have been healed the last time.
He would have been healed the last time, right? Particularly because this guy has 4 people around him who are motivated to take care of him. And so I think that if he was to be healed, he would have been healed the last time because as soon as the word gets out. So this is, it's not a far reach. Where did I say the nearest towns were? About 2 miles away. So 2 miles away from here is Lavares. I'm not going to make you guys walk to Lavares, but like you get the idea, right? So this is it's not a small dedication to this man. I want to go a little bit farther. So the buddies are going, I just want to be able to get into this moment, right? Can you see it? The word gets to somebody that Jesus is back in town, right? Like we thought he was gone, he's here. We're trying to get, I even take a guess, this is totally just a guess, but I think that the last time that he was in town, these guys might have tried to get him there on day 2 for the healing, right? Remember Capernaum, like he got up early in the morning? They might have been on the way last time to try to get there quick because they're highly motivated to do so. And so the disappointment, whatever, we didn't get it, they hear that there's a healing going, there's this guy who's healing everybody in Capernaum, and then they get back again. They're switching arms, right? This is on purpose. I'm not being silly. Why are you switching arms? It's not silly, it's not a hard question. He's heavy, right? And so like these guys are on the way to Jerusalem, and then they find out, or to Capernaum, and then they find out, like whatever it is, we missed it. There's whisper word going around. There's somebody going to be healed. There's a way to get healed. And so then they get back again, right? They go back, and they're just this disappointment and frustration, and whatever it is, frustration on all accounts. Like the brothers who are standing around their man are frustrated. I would imagine the paralyzed man is frustrated, right? This was my chance, right? I was so close to being able to be there. And so then they go back. Now the word comes, Jesus is back. Jesus is back in town. And I don't think they missed any time at all. Somebody heard the word from somebody who heard the word from somebody who heard the word. And I imagine they would run into 2 miles. Somebody would run into 2 miles to get to him. Everybody dropped what they were doing. And every one of these guys, like whatever they were doing, fishermen, carpenters, whatever they were, it's gone. They drop it. They're like, we're taking him now. And you imagine, can you feel the urgency? Like they're rushing around, like I got to get a water bottle, just go, like we're going to make it. And then they're going 2 miles toward Capernaum. I guess. I don't know how far away it was. I don't think it was local. So they're walking to Capernaum. It's not flat. right? It's up, it's down, it's up, we're going over mountains, we're going over hills. Like, it's not a process. So, like, what was it like for these guys? And it's, like, it's on purpose for me. What was it like to carry you to friends for these 2 miles? Like, your back is hurting. I imagine that periodically they would take breaks. Not yet. They would switch. They move from one side to the other. You know, dude. They're like, and, like, I don't know what their conversations were like, but this is a significant amount of time. Right? So as they're going, there's a significant amount. You happy to pick that one? It's not particularly comfortable with that either, I know. So like as they're going, are they teasing it? You know, like is there one guy who's like, dude, what do you got in your pockets? You know, like this is getting heavy. Like, I swear, as soon as you are healed, you're carrying me home. You know, or something ribbing between them. You know, like whatever it is. Like you know, like were they tight like that? Was it maybe not so much of a joyous affair? Were they just like get there? You know, but because you have to imagine that like they don't know if Jesus is staying all day in Capernaum. They don't know if he's going to be there once they get there. They are like they are committed to getting him all the way to this spot, and hopefully he's there. You know, like can you feel the energy in these guys to be able to get there to the point? What was it? So they get there and they come up, and so they imagine. I imagine them coming into town. Imagine them like they have gone like we're talking shoulders over. You know, like the hillside is steep. You know, so up the hill, the guys in the back have them over their head, guys in the front have them low, down going the other way. You know, like, and then they finally come into town. They don't know, it's not like Jesus isn't in this town square. So they're like, where's Jesus? Like, where's where, you know, maybe like there's a lot of people are trying to redirect him to where he's going. And finally they're like, all right, we found the house. So they get to the house, and let's just say they get there, they put him down. You can put him down. Gently, right? They put him down, and I imagine there's a couple guys that are taking a break, and then there's 2 others that are going to go up, right? Like, hey, go, it's great, get up. All right, fine, get up. So let's just say that like Robbie and Mark go up to this thing. So they're going to go up and they're going to find out what's going on up there. Let's go see if we can fit in, right? Let's go see if we can get in. And so they go up and they come back. They're like, dude, it's packed, right? Like we cannot get into this room. And the other guys, I mentioned like let's say Mark and Robbie or Mark and Jimmy were like, what do you mean you can't get in? We got to get in. Dude, we come this far? No, we can't get in. It's full. Even at the door. Is there another way in, right? So I gotta imagine that 2 guys are sitting here with their friend, and like maybe 2 of them, I don't know, like, but you get the idea that like they've been on this journey, and the other 2 are like walking around the house trying to see if there's a way in, and they're like, we can't get in, like it's full. Now in my particular perspective, if it was me, I think I would have been like, we are gonna sit by this door 4 in a row, and nobody's coming out of the building. Jesus is not going to be able to get past us, right? So that's kind of my perspective. You know, like we're all going to line up here and we'll just wait. We'll wait him out, you know? Like we are not going anywhere. We've done this. We've gotten this far to healing our friend. But maybe that wasn't an option. The word that they used was actually palsy. And I don't know if it was literally palsy because it was sometimes used for other things as well, other paralysis. But like maybe this guy was fading fast. Maybe like they were losing it. I don't know. Or maybe he didn't do well on the trip, right? Like it's not a simple trip. And so maybe along the way, like they were just seeing that like this guy, he can't hold on much longer. Maybe they went up to the front door and the disciples were turning them away. I'm just taking a guess, it was Peter's house or so. And so maybe Peter's like, no, sorry, we already have our own. I mean, the disciples turned other people away in the passage. There were other times where they were like, no, the master's full, the master can't do it. You know, like there were other times where they had to be the bearer of bad news. And so you kind of imagine them coming back. I can see Mark and Robbie coming back and the rest of us are waiting. And they're like, dude, it's not going to happen. And you're like, excuse me? Like, I'm going to tear down that wall with my own 2 hands if that's what it takes for me to get in there to tap my face and see Jesus. You know, I'm not, everybody has to have a friend who thinks that's not the box, right? You know, and so you imagine them like walking around and then somebody comes and sees that stair step going up to the top. And they're like, all right, hear me out. You know, I have an idea that is so crazy it just might work, right? So that they, I don't know, it says, since they could not get to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening on the roof above Jesus by digging through it and then lowering the mat that he was living on. I love that they went to this level, because it feels to me to be absurd, right? Like, you can wait, I don't know, we don't know the whole story, but ripping apart somebody's roof is actually pretty high on the commitment level. These guys are determined to get to them. And so you kind of imagine somebody all right, I think I have a plan. It's so crazy, it just might work. We're going to go up. Now again, imagine taking this guy up on a roof without tipping him off or anything. It's logistically tricky. This is not an easy task. And so when you just hear, oh, the 4 men took him down the mat and took him up on the roof, you miss a little bit of that that sweat and the blisters and the the adjustments and the pain and the pain in their back to be able to get him up there. And now I'm gonna jump inside a little bit and have a perspective inside the house. Imagine now we're inside the house. We're one of the people who was lucky enough to get there real early. We're listening to Jesus' teaching. We're soaking up every word. We just want to hear what he says. Everything he says is so cool. And so you're dialed into Jesus. Just can't get enough of him. And you hear this commotion at the back of this. Some guys are trying to get in. There's something going on. I don't really know. I'm focused. And they're maybe a little bit of arguing. I don't know if voices got raised. I don't know if they're maybe somebody's trying to push their way in. They're trying to excuse me, and nobody's there's no room. Sorry. And so there's this commotion going on. Maybe the owner of the home is sending them away. I don't know. And so there's a little bit of background noise in the middle of the teaching, and then it stops. I guess he got what he needed, but I don't know. I'm going back to listening, right? And maybe Jesus was a little interrupted for a second, but then he's focused it again, he zoomed in. So now, all of a sudden you start to see the sticks creak a little bit. A little bit of dust is falling down onto your head, You see dust and dirt as the ground is flexing as you walk across. You're weird, I wonder what's going on with that. And then, in front of Jesus, there's this, more dirt and stuff starts to fall down on it. The guys at the top are trying to figure out, how far in before he goes through. And so, they get to this spot, and then they start, at first it's just a little bit of dirt, just little bits of dirt, and then all of a sudden, it's clods of dirt. They're pulling back sticks and doing stuff, and just, you ever look up in a dirty attic or something, and stuff's falling in your face, right? So, everybody in there is looking up to see what this is, and most of the dirt is over Jesus, and the other people are getting a little bit of mess in their face as it goes, and it's opening, and you see a guy look in real quick to see if he's in the right spot, if he cut through at the right spot, and then they go dig, and now there's sticks are being torn up and stuff. One of the other places in the Bible says tiles, but there weren't any tiles in the homes in this case, so maybe some of the sticks were played together and you could take off several at a piece. So maybe that's, they're pulling up chunks. And in doing so, Jesus can't teach anymore. There's no way people don't listen to him with stuff falling in his face. So everybody's just kind of quiet now, and they're just watching this thing, this crazy mess unfold, right? And so they're ripping it open. It has to be a big hole, okay? It's not they're not lowering him down by his armpits or something like this, right? It's a big space. And so, the hole just keeps getting bigger, and you see there's guys up there moving around, and they're probably talking to each other, a little bit more, we're not far enough, they're having this, logistics, workman kind of conversations that are going on to get this thing open, and finally they get a big hole in it. Lowering a stretcher is complicated. I'm not even sure with all of us, if we were to do it on our first try, to lower it down on this rickety roof, without tipping somebody over, in a particular way. So, they're lowering it down, and so the sky is opened up. Show me the other picture real quick. And you see light streaming in now. There's this big mess up on the screen, or up above you, and then now the light's covered by a stretcher, and it's coming down, and the guys are, I just imagine, the guys are talking to each other. A little bit lower on that side. All right, now Mark, your side's still high, you go. Maybe they found some of Peter's rope and stuff, and they're making something happen. It wasn't going to happen on its own. They are not going to take no for an answer. They're going to push this extra mile and take care of their friend. And they're lowering it down, and it comes right down in front of Jesus. I imagine the guy on the mat, looking over his shoulder a little bit, as whatever paralysis he had, maybe he was able to see it. And he lowers him right down. Now there's room, right? There might not have been room before, but there's room. They moved out of the way to make space for this. You know, like, you thought that it was full and people got out of the way. So it's being lowered down. And now this guy's sitting eye to eye with Jesus. And so, like, I just imagine that, I imagine Jesus leaning into him and kind of talking to him real quiet. Everybody's trying to hear what he's saying. You know? This is my, here's my first question of the day. And if you have a pen, write it down. It's going to be up on the screen. The question is, do we fight tenaciously for the friends we have who can't fight for themselves? Particularly spiritually. We all want to fight alongside our friends, but sometimes they're too wounded to fight for themselves. And we have to, like, shoulder them. What if they're not able to help themselves at all? Does your love go beyond reasonable limits? Do we stop? We're like, hey, I did what I needed to. I helped a little bit. You know, like, that's the perspective you get of these brothers is that they were going to help their friend when he couldn't carry himself anymore. He couldn't do it for himself, and so their love went beyond these reasonable limits. So now imagine Jesus sizing this whole situation up. And Jesus is in a wonderful spot. Like, he knows everybody's hearts. He knows what's going on. He knew this was all going to happen. And so it comes down, and it says it in verse 5, Jesus saw their faith. It's interesting because a lot of the times when people get healed, or in the Bible, he saw his faith. Like, you know, he said, go in peace, your faith has healed you. But in this case, he saw their faith, right? He saw not only the faith of the man being lowered, but he saw the faith of the brothers that were lowering him down, and how they were not going to stop. So imagine Jesus saying, well, I'm going to take a moment and talk about faith. A lot of times when people hear the word faith, they think of it as like a wish, like a wishing on a star, a birthday wish or something. And like if you have to wish hard, I do believe, kind of thing. And if you doubt, then you lost it. You know, that faith is gone. But that's not really what the Bible, the biblical faith is. In my opinion, the opposite of biblical faith is not doubt. The opposite of biblical faith is apathy and inaction. Meaning that the opposite of biblical, when I say the opposite of biblical faith is apathy and inaction, it means you're not moved to do anything about it. You're not convinced enough to change what you're doing as a result of who God is. Faith is when you have confidence in who God has demonstrated himself to be, and because of who he's demonstrated, you move forward trusting in his nature. So it's based upon, like you've seen him, and the evidence that I have seen in who God is and the way he works supersedes whatever sort of fear I would have of my situation. Hebrews 11 is all about people who stepped out in action based upon who God had revealed himself to be. And these guys too, you can see them. They were stepping out in action based upon who God had revealed himself to be. And so as a result, you get this, this is faith in motion. It's faith that is actually revealed by somebody who believes it so strongly. They're like, I know it's going to happen. And that's what you see in these guys. Like God had revealed himself to be a healer, and they were stepping out in action, knowing that was going to be the same thing. And so Jesus said, when he saw their faith, saw the faith of this group of 5, he was moved. Interestingly enough, he didn't do what he expected. Like we all expected to say, "You're healed." And so I go back to that whisper, like I don't know what Jesus was saying. I kind of imagine that they're like going back and forth, and like he's like talking to him and listening to him, and they're going. And then at the end of it, it says, "You are forgiven." And that feels to me to be a curveball, a twist. Like I see them both crying. I see Jesus and the other guy. Like the guy thought he was coming, and his biggest problem was his legs. And he realized my biggest problem is not my body. My biggest problem is my heart. My biggest problem is my guilt. My biggest problem is an eternal problem, not a temporal problem. And so when Jesus actually gives him the better thing. In my Bible it has this little P-I-N-F next to the words, which is the present infinitive next to that word, forgiven, which means it's continually. And in this particular case, there's also this word about perfect, meaning that it's done once and for all, so that you are permanently forgiven. So it's not like you're forgiven up until today. You are permanently forgiven. You are in a state of permanent forgiveness. And so in this particular state, like Jesus leans in and he's like, "Hey, buddy, you are forgiven, and you are permanently forgiven moving forward. Like from here on out, you're forgiven." Like what a gift. Everybody had expected a temporary healing, and instead he was in a new permanent state of forgiveness. And he, we can glorify God because that was the better gift. So here's my second perspective. This has to do with other people that were observing this. It says, there was other people on the scenes. Oh, hold on a second. So it comes up again, the religious leaders are sitting in the room. They're like observing what's happening. They're like watching, particularly these ones from Jerusalem. They're trying to figure out what the deal is with this guy, right? They had heard about this new teaching. They had heard that there was somebody who spoke with this authority. And so they're trying to figure out, and sure enough, he is preaching differently. It's hard to put him in a box. You haven't really made up your mind. And then all of a sudden this whole thing happens with the roof falling in and people are lowering and Jesus is forgiving and stuff. And you're like, what did he just say? He said he forgave the guy permanently? You know, like now you're a religious leader. We're switching over to this other perspective of these people who have been observers and said, how can he say he forgives sins? Like the priest covers your sins. There is no forgiveness yet. They don't know that this forgiveness is possible. They're like, I don't even know I'm forgiven. This religious leader sitting there, he's like, how can this man say that he's permanently forgiven? Because we would temporarily get a reprieve from our sin until you sin again, and then you'd need more sacrifices or whatever. It's like that. And now he just went and said, you're permanently forgiven. Only God can say that. Like, who does this guy think he's God? You know, like this is the thought of the people. They're just saying this out loud. They're like trying to take it in. And so, like they have this like skepticism. It says, now teachers, this is verse 6, teachers of the law were sitting there speaking to themselves, or thinking to themselves, why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Now they didn't say anything out loud, and I can totally see this perspective. I can totally see myself doing this. Like I am often very skeptical, particularly I hear things that are happening about, you know, different churches or whatever, God doing things, and I'm like, I don't know, it sounds fishy. Like I'm sitting over there, I don't say it out loud, I'm just thinking in my head, like, that's not what I expect from God. That's not what I think God is, the way that he works. You know, like, I've seen him do work in these other ways, and I don't know. And this is my second point. Be careful dismissing God's work when it's not where you expect it. Like we all, if we admit it, think this way. Like we think that, like, all right, God doesn't work through fill in the blank. Big expensive ministries, or little backyard ministries, or charismatic churches, or conservative, or liberals, or conservatives, or fundamentals, or overseas people, or through Facebook, or monasteries, or political movements, or professional settings, or whatever. But rich and poor, sinners and saints, educated or not, patriotic or pacifist, Jesus eats with everyone. And so the idea that when God's up to something, like, be careful cutting down on what he's doing. It says immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts, and he said, why are you thinking these things? Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take up your mat, and walk? The Bible says Jesus felt in his spirit that they were thinking this, and so he responded to their thoughts out loud, which really feels like it would really catch you off guard, right? You're sitting there thinking a particular thought, and then all of a sudden Jesus answers your thought, he answers your question. And his question is like, it's like, it doesn't say that he rebuked them. It says he asked them. Like in Matthew, it says it was an evil thought, but he didn't say that he was like, attacking them. It's just like, why are you thinking this? Like, why are you doubting me? So then the question, I'm really challenged by this next question because it says, which is easier, to tell somebody they're forgiven or to tell them to get up and walk? And like in that, it's kind of weird because they're both easy to say. Your sins are forgiven. Get up and walk. Like, talking is talking. It doesn't mean anything. But the proof is after it. The proof is following what you say. Like, did it actually mean anything? Did it actually have an outcome? And so I don't know exactly, but what Jesus was the point specifically he's trying to make, because it was one of these like real logical questions. But maybe he was disappointed that they had seen a better healing just now, right? They had hoped to see a paralyzed man, and instead they had seen a forgiveness happen. And Jesus is like, I just gave you the better miracle. Like, of the two, I just gave you the better one. You know I'm God. You've seen 1,000 healings already. Like, you haven't seen a forgiveness yet. Like, isn't that, come on. Or maybe like he was like, I want you, religious leaders, to have the faith of these guys. These guys who came committed to the task, knowing that I would work, knowing that I was God. Like, you're sitting up here like on the sidelines. Like, get in the game. So you get this frustration out of Jesus. Verse 10 says, but I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. We're coming back to authority again. This word just keeps coming up. And so it's a theme. Jesus wants to know that I have the authority of God, and so even though you can't see what just happened, like you can't see I just did the better miracle. You can't see the forgiveness, but I'm willing to show you a healing so that you have proof that they both just happened. You know, like the better miracle of a permanent state of forgiveness is really the one that was carrying this guy into eternity. But I'll give you the other miracle too, just so that you know I'm God, just so that you can see that I have the authority on earth. I'm going to do this healing as well. And so he performs the second miracle on this guy. And maybe it's a lesser in our perspective. I mean, like, I think that the guy appreciated both of them. It says, he said to the man, I tell you, take up your mat and go home. He got up, took his mat, walked out in full view of them. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, we have never seen anything like this. So, you come back to this idea of, like, stand up and take your pallet. Another version says pallet, and go. You know, just, like, go home. You don't need this anymore. You know, like, don't leave it here, but you don't need it anymore. And so, like, I love that Jesus was like, now you can do some stuff. Stand up and stretch your legs and do what you need to. So we've seen it through the eyes of a friend. We've seen it through the eyes of a skeptic. Now we're going to look at it from the eyes of the guy on the mat. I honestly think that after meeting Jesus and knowing that he was forgiven, he already had new life. But because of his disability, he still kind of needed the help as well. And he was still in need. Each of us are in need too. We sometimes try to disguise this. We sometimes don't acknowledge it. We hide it because of pride, or shame, or fear. We pretend like we don't have need. We pretend like we are not in a state of helplessness. But we all have need. And so, in this particular case, Jesus is like, put aside the lies, acknowledge that you have need, and then allow yourself to receive this permanent, lasting, ongoing forgiveness. I forgot to mention this. The word that he used when he said for you are forgiven, it's the same tense, it's the same ending that Jesus used when he said, it is finished. Remember on the cross when he said, it is finished. It's done and it's permanently done. That's the same word ending that he used for you are forgiven. You're forgiven and permanently forgiven. And so, like, we have to now receive that. We have to allow ourselves to be carried, and we have to allow ourselves to live in new life. I also like the man that Jesus told the man to pick up the stretcher, because, like, now you're in a position to be able to do for yourself. You're able to be able to feed yourself and start walking forward. It says everybody watched it. He was in full view of everyone. And so you think about this, just if you think about the man who had paralysis, he had probably been stared at a lot. He'd been lying in different places. He was destitute. And I don't know if people would look at him directly, or if they would kind of glance at him sideways, or pretend they didn't see him. But having everybody's attention on him, now all of a sudden he has everybody's attention on him, and I don't think he minded one bit. You know, like, go ahead, in full view of everyone. He stands up, he picks up his mat, and walks out. He doesn't have to be afraid anymore. He doesn't have to be ashamed anymore. He doesn't have to be anything. He's forgiven and permanently forgiven. Jesus just gave him a gift. And so what can man do to me now? So he stands up. So here's my third question, and my wish for all of us. Are you willing to pick up your mat and walk in a position of eternal forgiveness? The stuff in your head that holds you back doesn't matter. Acknowledge the gift, accept the gift, embrace the gift, and live forward. Live forward. Don't live back. Live forward. Like, live the life you were meant to live. It says everybody was amazed and excited, and if you're ready to make this change, you're going to have a whole family of people that are amazed and excited with you. And so I think that that's really the place where I want to leave it, is that we ourselves, we can see ourselves as the assistant, we can see ourselves as a spectator, but it's also worth seeing ourselves as a person in need. After the service, there are some people who will be around for prayer, and I would like you to take advantage of that. If you need prayer to embrace this forgiveness moving forward, to walk in it and stop living in the past and live in the future, there are people who are committed to pray along with you. So I'm going to close in prayer now, and we're going to continue. God, it's such a privilege to be able to be transported back to this room and watch this crazy event happen right before us. It's crazy to watch the love that these guys have for their friend, and how they just wouldn't be limited by what was in front of them. crazy to see that people would dismiss it as being a sideshow and miss out because God wasn't doing what they had expected him to do. And it's just so wonderfully crazy that we have this opportunity to be forgiven. It just doesn't even make sense that there is a way to move forward in a state of permanent forgiveness. And in doing so, to be released from shame and guilt and fear, to be able to accept this new path forward, and the same that was given to this man is given to us. God, I just pray that as we walk through our week, we'd be able to walk in this position of forgiveness. And in doing so, we'd be able to just walk in the footsteps of Jesus. We're so thankful for what you've done, and we're excited about what you're going to do. In your precious name we pray. Amen.